running a business is a tough and lonely journey. Welcome to the Executives on the Front Lines podcast, where business owners and C-suite executives like you will get real answers to your everyday business problems. I'm your host, Jeff Palacio, and together we will learn from senior leaders who have occupied every top box of a company's org chart for every size organization and who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. Welcome to another episode of the Executives on the Front Lines podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Palacio, and very excited about today's topic, how to survive and thrive in an underperforming international expansion initiative, as well as this is the first time it's ever happened. We have two expert guests in terms of their expertise. Welcome to the podcast, both Elza Malik and Sandy Ramirez.
Thank you for having us, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, very good. Yeah, that's good. We're very excited to talk about this. But so just what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen in companies in terms of their international expansion efforts, whether they have not started one or in the process of?
Yeah, I think what the four main areas that we notice when organizations are planning or have started this process and what roadblocks they run into is culture, really understanding the feel of the country that they're entering into and how people behave within the cultural context. The financial runway, which Sandra's a wealth of expertise in that field around making sure you understand how much runway you need realistically, and if you've got enough of that and all the complexities that it comes with. Other areas are when it comes to communication and language, specifically making sure things are translated appropriately, both from a legal standpoint as well as a communication and marketing standpoint. And the last one is compliance. Both the laws, everything from labor to opening up a new organization into that space. So that way you're not kind of stumbling upon any type of legal issues or legal concerns that could irreparably damage your brand.
Elza, I know you are a resident marketing expert, not only domestically in the U.S., but internationally. So what are some of the marketing strategies to align and optimize in a foreign country where, everything's unfamiliar?
Yeah, I think the biggest component is understanding how people are going to buy in that space and how they're going to interpret your brand. There are certain regions of the globe that are more American affinity, like there's just a better tie to. Western Europe's a good example of that, but their buying pattern is much more in person. That's how they build trust. So sometimes we recommend more of a field marketing environment. In fact, US is one of the exceptions to the rule where in other countries, you do have to have some type of boots on the ground methodology when it comes to entering from a sales and marketing perspective. Other areas discuss like how direct your communication is going to be. The kind of trend is the further east you go, the less direct your messaging has to be. If you're very direct in the European market, you come off very arrogant. If you're very direct in the Eastern European market, you come off as very scammy, and it just kind of actually gets worse and worse the further down you go, because there is a sense of, if I want to trust you, it's not the guarantees that we're used to necessarily in the US market. It's other areas that show commitment and trust that we have to understand. Other areas that you can kind of work into, like the Middle East is very open to novel ideas. So if you have new ways of entering that market, they'd be much more open to it. And you just have to kind of work through that dynamic, and it totally depends on the brand and the region that you want to enter into, and find a nice symbiotic relationship there.
Yeah, it's just the nuances are just incredible. In terms of Sandy, I think this is your expertise. How do you navigate through the complex regulatory guidelines that U.S. companies are not used to?
Of course. So obviously, head office wants to set up ways and regulations into each area of the new company. But then the new company, there needs to be a translation of what that actually means from one country to another. And that could come to something very different from what it's meant to be understood in the original country. There needs to be an alignment of what would you expect from the company, from the new company, and from the, let's say, basis company. Then compliance come into knowing professional standards. How would you expect people to behave, like customer service to be provided? But compliance is actually like the last step. First, we have to understand ways and regulations in the country and make the origin ones match to that.
Elza, what about the operational optimization challenges, in terms of streamlining processes and enhancing scalability?
Yeah, I think you have to look at that in twofold. There's obviously technology and process, and then there's people, which have to get addressed in different ways. Um, Sandy touched on home office processes that need to get translated into the new region or into the new country. And technology, I think, has a place, but the biggest question mark is really people, because it goes back to how do your new labor force that is in that region or country, how do they build a team? How do they foster collaboration and innovation? And that totally depends on both the industry that they're in as well as the labor laws that are in place. We know that there's an immense amount of turnover that is just second nature in the MENA region. There's very fierce competition in APAC, especially if you're in engineering and technology. And then in Europe, there's a lot of labor laws that can actually ding you and give you some serious fines that would hurt your budget. All of those things, plus the fact that you have to create and foster a very thoughtful relationship with your new employees in that country, creates a world of complexities. I have a client who, is an American, and they want to say, well, what if we did tennis and table tennis and pizza parties? I'm like, well, I hate to break it to you, but in construction, that's actually meals are provided. That's actually a requirement to be in that industry in that country. So you're going to have to do that plus a bunch of other things to foster, because if you didn't, then you would, come off very inappropriate in that industry. Um, so those are the things that you just have to understand of what is normal in that space and how do you create something that's still connected to the identity of the brand from their original location, but create this new identity that complies with both the cultural context as well as the legal context that you have to understand.
Yeah, no, yeah, I just think it's incredible. That is not my experience in terms of having any, besides working for a couple of German companies, but I always was U.S. based. So yeah, it's amazing about the different things you have to hurdle and the landmines and so on. So, Sandy, what are some of the financial strategies to manage risk and optimize performance in other countries?
First of all, we have no idea about the history of the country. Like, we're not there as home office, let's say. So when we come to a new country, if you bring someone that knows about their country, it's okay, but you still would need help locally. So what happens is you need to take into consideration things like transfer pricing, like maybe exchange hedging that you're normally in your original country not used to. You don't normally use those concepts or have access to those resources. And so they're basic for the planning of the new company. Let's say you have extraordinary operations and marketing is going perfectly. In human resources, you have an extraordinary team. But if in your planning, you're not considering those things that make a company, a subsidiary abroad, be part of your results, you're going to be missing a lot and maybe even not even have the cash flow for the operations. So it's so important that you don't just stay with the financial things you know of as head office, but go deep into having a company abroad, working with your technological people, other areas, whatever that is.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of great things, and again, the nuances that you have to navigate. But Elza, what would be kind of a best practice summary in terms of navigating international expansion?
Yeah, I always recommend that if your end goal is what we call, at least internally at Exec HQ, is to get to a stable revenue status. There are really three major phases that we recommend you go through. First, it's that validity phase where you have to investigate, work with local talent and or partners to make sure that you understand the landscape that you want to go into. And sometimes that may be multiple landscapes because you're considering maybe a handful of countries before you narrow yourself down and validate your assumptions within that. The next phase we always recommend is doing your due diligence, which is every detail of the strategy that you need to take into consideration. The big ones being, culture, compliance, legal, communication, financial runways, labor laws, those things. That's where that phase really has to kick it into high gear and be very detailed about the process. So this is what it takes. This is the amount of effort I have to put in to not only enter the country, but get to a place of revenue stable. And then, like everything, there's never a strategy that gets through 100% accuracy. So the strategic implementation is critical to your success and making sure you keep that strategy a living, breathing ecosystem so you can get to that phase. Those are probably the three most recommended steps. And obviously the last one is the longest because we don't know every industry and brand has a different runway. But making sure you got the first two dialed really helps the third, and they all kind of have a connected relationship with each other.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that summary. Any other parting words for our business owners or CEOs that are thinking about an expansion, international expansion, or actually in one right now?
Yeah, I think if you're thinking about it, please make sure that you work through your validity phase and you take the time to make the appropriate steps for that. And that could be connecting with a language partner or someone like Exec HQ to help you through that. If you are in the phase and maybe you're not performing as well as you thought you would, I will use Sandy's words of you don't know what you don't know. So go find somebody who knows. If there's kind of a little bit of an inkling to say, I don't know if I fully grasp this, um, the sooner you make the ask to learn more, the kind of less expensive the cost to fix it is going to be. Because the further down the path you go, the harder it is to kind of turn around and get you to a point where your expansion strategies are successful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Elza and Sandy, thank you so much for being on the Executives on the Front Lines podcast today. I know you're going to have a link to the four pillars, little article that will help business owners, as well as we'll have the link to your Calendly to set up a quick call just to see if you can help. So thank you both.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Executives on the Front Lines. If you are interested in learning more about today's guest, you can schedule a 15-minute call with them by scanning the QR code or using the link in the episode description. Please join me every 2 weeks to learn from another great leader sharing insight that can help you and your business.